clicker? Don't need that. Good morning, everyone. It's the third year of Enable now. And I was always told to start presentations with a big stat, so I came to 15 million user opportunity in terms of the numbers of users that were enabled in these platforms. And actually, while I was doing the maths for it, I think it's increased a little bit, and I'll come on to some of that data in a little while. But third year of Enable, where are we now? What I wanted to do was just take a little review of what's happened over the last 3 years of this event and the platform specifically within that we've been looking at. So a lot has happened. Primarily, we've seen significant market momentum in telephony enablement within collaboration platforms specifically. So Dom mentioned it today, and we're delighted to have gold sponsors of Microsoft, Zoom, and Cisco. We could not be going any better than that in terms of those gold sponsors, and you'll hear from them all today on their panels and their keynotes. But we've seen significant market momentum, real growth in the number of telephony users within all of these platforms, and real growth in the uptake of these platforms from providers within this room, not only for telephony enablement, but also in contact center and customer experience as well. We've seen these platforms and the partner programs, so if you look at Microsoft Operator Connect, if you look at Zoom Provider Exchange, if you look at Cisco Cloud Connect, we've seen these programs developed and be refined to improve things for partners. And that's an absolutely key facet here. I think really understanding, and I'll talk about this later on, the alignment between yourselves as a service provider or a partner, a value-added services partner, alignment to that vendor is absolutely key in understanding what they're doing in terms of strategic alignment. So we've seen these programs refined over time. Also, a lot of the providers in this room are now running a multi-platform strategy. And the reason that they're doing that is there's compound reasons. Later on this afternoon, Dom mentioned, Finbar and I will take you through some of our enterprise research. And in that, we found that an increasing number of enterprises, especially large multinational enterprises, are running multiple collaboration estates. They're running multiple platforms. So being able to offer as many different options in terms of platforms is absolutely vital if you want to be able to capture that entire market. So what we've seen is growth in the number of providers that are taking part in multiple different platforms, whether that's Microsoft Teams voice enablement, whether it's Cisco, whether it's Zoom Phone. In terms of the results, I think everyone in this room is aware, different providers have had varying amounts of success. I think a lot of that depends on that platform alignment that we've seen previously. A lot of it depends on go-to-market, and a lot of it depends on differentiation, which we'll come on to today. But we have seen incredibly varying results in terms of some providers that have been incredibly successful and some who have found it really challenging in terms of adding users and enabling telephony within these platforms. We've also seen huge geographic expansion. I think when we started the event a few years ago, Tom's Empowering Cloud does a great interactive map of the countries covered within Operator Connect and Direct Routing, for example. The geographic coverage was limited. We've seen that radically expand across all three vendors, Microsoft, Cisco, and Zoom, to almost cover the entire globe in terms of telephony enablement. And then finally, one of the key focuses as well is focusing on OSS BSS and really aligning that back end and front end. And we've seen a real focus in automation. When we've done previous research looking at the main investment focuses for service providers, it's that automation layer that is absolutely key. And there's a lot of providers in this room and third-party partners that can assist with that. So that's a little bit about where we are. This research, a few of you, anyone who's at our US event will have seen this. This comes from our service provider research. What we ask service providers are, what products are important to you now and what products are going to be important to you in the future? And what I wanted to highlight was the voice enablement platforms here that I've circled. So voice enablement in Microsoft Teams, voice enablement in WebEx, and voice enablement in Zoom. And as you can see, all of these platforms form the core pillar of service provider offerings. And we think all of these not only are important now, but are going to be increasingly important in the future. And if you look at Zoom enablement for Zoom, for example, I think it's defendable that they're the freshest player in this space, and that is considered going to be most important in the future. So a core part of service provider offerings is voice enablement within these platforms. I thought I can't do a keynote presentation without putting some numbers up there, so I'm prepared for scrutiny. So I thought I'd divide this by looking at the North American and Western European markets, and all of this data comes from Cavell's latest research. If you want any more information on that, find Umar, find Chris, find me, find the rest of the team. So if we look at North America, 93 million business telephony users. That's the total number of business telephony users in North America. That's US and Canada. I'm not including Mexico. Then we look at Western Europe, 98 million users. Those are across our key core markets. Then we look at the cloud base. So how many of these are using publicly hosted multi-tenant cloud solutions for their PBX control? As you can see, penetration is significantly higher in North America than it is in Western Europe. Depends where you are in Western Europe. In the UK, here, for example, we're at 60% penetration of cloud. If we go into France and Germany, significantly less than that in the 20 percentiles. Then I wanted to look at that piece that I was talking about before, collaboration-centric users. So these are users that are enabled via either Zoom phone, Microsoft Teams telephony enablement, or WebEx calling. So as you can see, a really significant chunk of that overall market, particularly in North America, are collaboration-centric users. So if you're not part of that market, you're missing out on a huge area of potential opportunity. And then when we talk about enablement markets, we're talking about a specific subdivision of that market. So if we talk about Operator Connect, if we talk about Cisco Cloud Connect and Zoom Provider Exchange, it's a proportion of that overall market. So this is your collaboration-centric user base, and then the specific enablement markets that we're talking about today are represented in the purple box. And when I looked at our forecast out for 5 years, the forecast is actually for that market to more than triple, which, as I said, gets to more than the 15 million users that I was totaling. As I said, I planned this keynote a little while ago, and since then the numbers have gone up. So by 2030, we think it's going to be a really significant opportunity, and that's North America and Western Europe alone. Really big markets in APAC. We've got our APAC event in February coming up, and a really significant opportunity there, and in rest of world. So that's sort of quantifying some of the opportunity for you. This is what I wanted to focus on, just really quickly, on what we mean by telephony enablement. So here we're talking about structured marketplaces. So why have these marketplaces come about? Firstly, there's a driver, and we'll hear from Cisco, Zoom, and Microsoft in a minute about the reasons why they've developed these platforms. But effectively, they want their collaboration users to be able to easily add telephony, and they don't necessarily want to be regulated in every country. They want partners to do that for them. So you've got drivers from the platform provider perspective. Enterprises, which we're going to hear a lot more from later on today with Tom's panel, want to be able to easily add telephony to some of their users. So there's a driver from an enterprise perspective. And then finally, partners and service providers, you want access to that multi-million user market. So you get these three drivers which have created these telephony marketplaces. And what do I mean by that? These are more structured, so it's not a pure play BYOC, it is a more structured telephony market within a specific application or platform. And that might involve any of those things you see on screen, but it's more structured than a pure BYOC play. What we've really seen is this huge drive towards these enablement markets, because there are a huge number of benefits from a service provider perspective. And that primary benefit that I talked about before is access to those customers. So if you want to access those 15 million users in North America and Western Europe, you have to be part of these enablement markets. These enablement markets, because of their more structured nature, allow you to align better with Microsoft, Cisco, and Zoom to ensure quality of service, issue identification and resolution. All of those things help with that better alignment with the platform vendor. There's a huge migration opportunity. I know a number of the providers in this room have developed specific products to help enterprises migrate from what you consider legacy premises-based systems to new collaboration or UCaaS world. There's a huge migration opportunity. As I said, if we take France and Germany, for example, only around 20% of the users in those markets are currently using cloud. That's a really significant opportunity. I think our forecasts over the next 5 years are for France and Germany to add more than 10 million net new cloud users, and that's France and Germany alone. It can help you expand globally. So you no longer have to spin up your own instance of a solution. If you utilize Zoom or Microsoft or Cisco, they've already got the platform available in a huge volume of countries, and that's really assisted a lot of providers in this room with global expansion. And one thing that we're really focused on at Cavell, it enables that broader technology play across what we consider maybe a traditional MSP in terms of professional and managed services, additional value-added services, and a much broader portfolio. So those are some of the benefits of enablement markets. But there are some challenges. As I said, we've seen we get a lot of anonymized data at Cavell. We've seen really varied results from different providers. Some who've done really well on the platforms, some who've done less well. And there are a number of challenges within these platforms. I don't think anyone's going to shy away from that. I think reduced margins and the commercial challenges. If you look at traditional platforms, there was a lot more revenue and margin available on the license seat. If you look at the modern platforms, actually that's more difficult. Do you sell the associated underlying collaboration license, or are you just selling telephony on top of that? There's a commercial challenge there. Additionally, I put strict vendor requirements here. You do have to align with these providers. If you want to be part of Operator Connect, then you have to agree with Microsoft's terms and conditions and align to their vendor requirements on that. Differentiation. This is one of the key things. If you're in a telephony enablement market where you are effectively a logo within a marketplace, how do you differentiate? And I'll come on to how you can do that in a little bit. But differentiation, a key challenge. There are some operational adjustments that are required in terms of how you work, how you sell. It's very different to those traditional models. So there's both on the OSS, BSS integration side, but also how you work from a service provider perspective needs to be considered. And finally, you don't have development control over that platform. I think a lot of us are getting used to that in the modern era of UCaaS, but you are not going to influence how Microsoft develop that product, or how Zoom develop that product, or Cisco develop that product. So there are some challenges you have to overcome. What I wanted to hear was, if you can all scan on screen here, I'd love to hear what you think the biggest challenge. I've just left a few of the options here in terms of reduced margins. So what's the biggest challenge that you see currently selling your voice services? And if you don't sell voice services directly, but you partner, please let me know what you think your partners see. So I've left up there reduced margins and commercials, the differentiation challenge, operational adjustments, lack of platform control, and the vendor requirements. So really interested for your feedback on this. And I think the differentiation point that we're seeing on screen is absolutely key. I actually thought maybe we'd end up with the commercials. The bottom line tends to be the main piece. But actually, I think that differentiation piece is a real challenge for everyone in the room. And I think I'll come on to on the next slide how you can potentially differentiate from different platforms. But reduced margins and commercials, limited differentiation looking like the biggest option. Please do continue responding to the poll, because I'll use all this data, and obviously none of your personal data, but for my own research in the future. So it looks like limited differentiation is going to be the key challenge there. Hopefully, I will be able to slightly remedy that over the next coming slides. First of all, you do have to meet the end business requirement, the end user business requirement. This comes from a study that we did of, we're going to be sharing all of the research later on when you're here after the break. So this was 602 decision makers who've bought collaboration platforms, either WebEx, Zoom or Cisco or Teams. And we asked them, what do you need for telephony requirement? What are you looking for in your telephony solution? So specifically the telephony provider. And as you can see, reliability and call quality is the #1 requirement, above price and overall. This does vary depending on business size. Smaller businesses, as you're all aware of, more cost conscious, but reliability and call quality, absolutely crucial. And another ongoing theme that you're going to see throughout today is security and compliance. Security is so important. For a few years ago, security almost completely disappeared from our enterprise research as an enterprise driver, because it was almost considered table stakes within UCaaS. But now, I think with the rising focus that we're seeing on AI and data, the scrutiny of data, we're seeing security and compliance really come back up to the top of the list in terms of key requirements when it comes to telephony. When it comes to integrations, that's another really important area. And the reason I particularly wanted to highlight this was, if we look at third-party phone system, it's actually only the third most popular integration. So even though you've got your telephony system, actually businesses are probably prioritizing their CRM integration and potentially even their analytics integration above your phone system integration. So you are not necessarily the key piece in the enterprise puzzle. It depends business to business, but you have to think about those integration capabilities in a more wide-ranging sense than just collaboration and telephony. CRM, third-party analytics, particularly important, above phone system, and contact center that Finbar will talk about later on. And the differentiation point, I think, is really important. But it's not only differentiation in how you sell, but what else would your customers like to buy from you? This is, if you bought a telephony solution within one of those collaboration platforms, what else would that customer like to buy from you? IT software, productivity solutions, networking or connectivity. As I said, security and compliance, really important. Call recording and compliance. Usage or performance metrics. We're seeing a huge spike in our own research and demand for continued analytics across user behavior and usage. So these are some of the product synergies that we think are potentially most viable. And on that differentiation point, these are the key ways that we see providers differentiate. Solution resilience, we talked about, and this all aligns nicely to the previous graph that I put up before in terms of the data there. When it comes to call quality, solution reliance is important, your reputation as a provider, the commercials that you offer, and that's not just price, that could be effective bundling, all of those other areas. Value-added services, so many of the sponsors out there are related to value-added services, so please do go and see all of them for the multiple options you can get there. Legacy support, this is really important. I'm sure we'll hear from it in Tom's enterprise panel later on. Actually, huge volumes of businesses still need legacy devices. They still need to be able to support those businesses, so you have to be able to integrate into that. Migration tools in exactly the same way. I know a number of the sponsors and the providers in this room have developed specific migration tools. If you can help customers migrate from those considered legacy systems to the new world, it opens up a whole ream of possibilities. Automation, a key focus, and also geographic coverage. If you can cover as many countries as possible, that differentiates you from competition. So what's the Cavell's recipe for success? This is a Matthew Townend influence slide, for anyone who recognises the image. First of all, strategic commitment. We had a chat about this when we were preparing the deck for this. The providers that we've really seen succeed, and a number of them in this room and I'm looking at now, have really committed to enabling telephony within these platforms. So first of all, really investing in these platforms is incredibly important. That strategic commitment is the first step. Secondly, that OSS BSS investment. Those that have managed to automate and integrate their OSS BSS systems as effectively as possible, reducing back-end costs and improving efficiency, have been most successful. That's really important. And also, that platform alignment and relationship with that vendor is absolutely key. Cisco, Microsoft, and Zoom are huge organizations. You need to know who is the right person to talk to. Have you got those relationships in the right place? Do you understand what their strategy is? Does your strategy align to their strategy? That piece, in terms of platform alignment, I think is absolutely key for success in this space. So that's our recipe for success. And when we come to aligning on the strategies, this is what I wanted to leave you with. And you're going to hear from Zoom shortly, Microsoft and Cisco all today. That is critically important. And I think that's why we're so pleased that they've all sponsored this event and they're all going to be talking. The things that, and I'll leave them to talk about their own strategies, but from our Cavell perspective, what we've really seen them focusing on is channel optimization, getting really good channels to help them sell their business, to sell their wide portfolios. There's actually a really limited number of channel partners that can sell unified communications, contact center, and productivity software. So there's a scramble for that channel. Also, artificial intelligence, whether it's Copilot, whether it's Zoom's AI Companion, whether it's WebEx AI, AI is a real focus for these vendors. So are you aligned on AI? Do you have the capability of selling it? And finally, we're seeing, to Finbar's great delight if he's in the audience, a real shift towards customer experience and contact center. It's a real focus for all of these businesses. You've seen Zoom for the first time this year make the Gartner Magic Quadrant for CCaaS, Microsoft with Dynamics 365, Cisco have put a huge investment into WebEx Contact Center, and this is a real focus for these businesses. So aligning on these, aligning with the vendors around the channel, AI, and customer experience, we think is going to be increasingly important.